Hello and welcome. My name's Jerry Hess. I'm a member of the Developer Integrations team over here at Element Payment Services. Today I'd like to take the time to talk to you about TriPOS and provide you with a short demo. TriPOS is a turnkey payment processing application designed to provide a single simplified integration. TriPOS is compatible with a comprehensive suite of hardware devices, connects to all authorization providers, and removes the business software application from PCI scope. TriPOS also eliminates the need to develop to various hardware manufacturer device APIs. Developers only need to complete a single simplified integration to support end-to-end integrated payments. TriPOS also promises a future-proof integration. Any newly supported devices, authorization platforms, and/or transaction protocols such as EMV automatically become available to customers through TriPOS without the need for additional development work. For today's demo, the first thing we're going to need is a Express test account, and for that simply head over to the elementps.com, our main page, and scroll down. Simply submit this form and you'll receive your test credentials via email shortly after. Once you have those credentials, you're going to want to head over to github.com/elementps, our brand new GitHub repository. You'll notice we have 3 samples for TriPOS. We have a Java sample, a C# sample, and a PHP sample. For today's demo, we'll be utilizing the C# code. And as we get to the main project page here, you'll scroll down to the prerequisites, and you'll see here a link for the Express test account. If you haven't created that, you'll want to do that now. The next thing you'll need is the TriPOS SDK itself, and for that, simply register at this URL, and then you'll want to log in at mft.elementps.com. Once you get logged in here, you'll see the Element TriPOS folder, and within this folder we have the TriPOS SDK itself. Simply download and extract this zip file. If you have a physical test device, you can also grab the drivers for that device while you're here. Once you extract the TriPOS SDK, it'll look very similar to this folder here. Within the SDK folder, you'll see the TriPOS Setup Installer. Have your test account credentials ready because you'll be prompted for them as you walk through the install. Once you have TriPOS installed, you'll notice in your Program Files directory a new folder called Vantiv. Within that Vantiv folder, there'll be the TriPOS Service folder. And within the root of TriPOS Service here, you'll notice this Logs folder. I'd like to point this out. If you're doing any troubleshooting, these logs will prove to be very valuable. Also, if you're looking for assistance from myself or my colleagues, we'll probably point you or need these log files to help troubleshoot. Also, within that root of TriPOS Service, you'll see the TriPOS configuration file. I won't go over the configuration file in too much detail as it's very well commented. Each value is well defined. But I will point out that today I'm utilizing this pinpad idle message, which we'll see displayed on the device here shortly. I've also got cashback turned on and tips allowed, as well as debit supported. One thing I'd like to point out are the lanes that are configured by default within the TriPOS configuration. For today's demo, I'll be utilizing lane 9999. This is the null pin pad simulator. You can utilize this lane if you don't have a physical test device yet and would like to begin integrating to TriPOS immediately. We're also going to utilize a physical pin pad, a Verifone MX915, and for that I'll be utilizing lane 1. Within this lane configuration, you'll see that we're utilizing the Verifone Form Agent driver. If we were utilizing a different device, for instance the Verifone VX805, we would utilize the Verifone XPI driver. Along with the appropriate driver, you'll want to ensure that the communication settings are set up accordingly and jiving with your local machine. And to ensure that, simply go to your device manager and open up the COM port where the device is installed and check the port settings. Lastly, I just want to point out this is contactless MSD entry allowed tag. You'll want to have this set to true if you're going to be testing any kind of contactless transactions such as Google Wallet, Apple Pay. Now that we have TriPOS installed, a quick test will show us that she's there and listening. Simply type in localhost port 8080/help and all of our documentation will be provided. Here's our API documentation. And if you don't feel like looking through the Word document, you can always fire this up and take a look at all the API calls. So now we have TriPOS running and installed. Let's go ahead and fire up this sample code, and for that we're going to click download zip, which will give you a zip of the entire project. Once you have that zip folder extracted, it'll look very similar to this here. And let's just go into our project directory and fire up our solution file. This sample code is ready to go. We don't need to configure anything within the code itself, so let's just go ahead and get this compiled. And here's our sample code. You'll notice on the form in the top left we have a standard sale URL hard-coded along with the listening port. That listening port you can choose during the course of the install, or you can always change it within the configuration file itself. Beneath that, we're going to populate some request data here. The TriPOS.NET service accepts either XML or JSON. Down here we'll have the response passed back to us from the Express platform, and we're going to take this response and parse it out and place it in this nice clean receipt over here. Lastly, down here in the bottom right hand corner, for each request we'll provide the request headers that are sent. So let's go ahead and populate some JSON request data. And you'll notice this is all non-sensitive data. Here we have some billing information. We have a transaction amount. And the last value I want to point out is this lane ID. For our first test transaction, we'll utilize the null pinpad simulator on lane 9999. So let's go ahead and send through this request. The first thing you'll notice are the request headers down here provided. And here's our response. Standard sale for $3.25 with a 49-cent tip. You'll see we've utilized our global payments test card, Visa test card. Here's some signature data we've provided for you. We've parsed out this signature data and rendered it at the bottom of the receipt here. Lastly, we'll see down here at the bottom that with each TriPOS sale, TriPOS is going to return a direct URL that can be posted to for returns, reversals, or voids, which is very convenient. There's not too much we can do with the null pinpad simulator, so let's go ahead and fire up this MX915, and for that I'm simply going to change the lane ID over to lane 1. Aside from that, I'm not going to change anything in our request. We're going to simply send this through to the pinpad. And as I send the request through, if you take a look at the device, we now have the verbiage "please slide card," or as well as the contactless logo. I'm going to go ahead and utilize Google Wallet for our first sale here, and for that I simply put my personal cell phone next to the pinpad and it picks it right up. These tip selections are configured within the TriPOS config, so if you wanted something different than 15, 18, 20%, you could certainly configure that. And here we have a confirmation for the total amount. And lastly, we should be prompted for a signature here. And do a little squiggly. And if we look back at our sample application, you'll notice that we've got our approved response back and parsed out that information. This was a contactless credit sale with a subtotal of $3.25 and a 65-cent tip. If we look at our response data, we can see the signature data passed back from the pinpad, and we've rendered that signature accordingly over here. So there we have it, a Google Wallet transaction. And the beauty here is we didn't have to tell TriPOS that that was a contactless transaction. We simply told TriPOS that this was a standard sale for the amount of $3.25. TriPOS interacts with the MX915, and depending on the card entry method provided by the cardholder, takes that data and passes it back to the Express platform appropriately. So let's go ahead and do another standard sale here. At this time we're going to change absolutely nothing in the request, simply send it through. Same verbiage appears on the pinpad, "please slide card" with the contactless logo. For this transaction I'll utilize a Visa debit test card. And as I slide it through here, you'll notice the options for credit, debit, or gift. Let's try debit. And as I have cashback turned on within the TriPOS configuration, we're being prompted for cashback. And we'll go with $20. And we need a 4-digit PIN. And our tip amount. And the total. As it's a debit transaction, no need for a signature there. And if we look at our parsed response data, we can see this was a swipe debit sale for $3.25 with $20 cash back and a 65-cent tip. If we look at the response data, as there was no signature, you'll see this status code on debit transaction, signature not required by payment type. And as this was a debit transaction, a reversal is the only URL provided. So once again, we did not need to specify debit. We simply pass this to TriPOS and TriPOS handles the rest. Without changing anything in the request, let's do one last transaction here, and this time we'll utilize a Amex card that's credit only. As we swipe it through, we're prompted for tip and the total amount displayed. And since it's credit, we're going to need a John Hancock here. So there we go. That's all the time I have for today. Please head over to our brand new GitHub repository and feel free to contribute to any of our code samples out there. We could be contacted via email, certification@elementps.com, or feel free to head over to our main page and contact us that way. Thank you for your time today. It's been my pleasure providing this demo for you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Until then, may every day be a happy payments day.